This is Sessions with Sara Cate and Ashley, a podcast that explores the feelings, emotions, and experiences of what it means to be human in this world. This podcast is intended for educational purposes only and is not meant to replace therapeutic services of any kind. Please refer to the list of references if you need support.
And before you dive in, please like, subscribe, comment, share with anyone you think might also connect with today's session. Our goal is to reach as many people as possible, and we are endlessly grateful for your continued support. So, let's get to it.
Welcome, everyone, to another Sessions with Sara Cate and Ashley. I am Sara Cate.
I'm Ashley.
Today's topic is a spicy little delight. Nugget. Delight. Ashley texted me, as we do, with ideas. We'll just have like all of a sudden like this like light bulb moment, and we'll send a text to the other and say, hey, can we talk about this? And
and Sarah said, of course. And then today when I got here, I was like, so tell me more.
I was like, drop in with me about this. Because a lot of the time we will have ideas for topics that we want to really explore together and in real time. And Ashley and I both work with clients on the reg. And so it was one of those things that was coming up a lot in her practice. And so for me, and that happens a lot with me in my practice, a theme will kind of run through my week with clients, or sometimes weeks with clients. And, it really comes from this place of the collective. However, each person's story within that is very different. Mm-hmm. And so when Ashley texted me, she was like, man, this has really been coming up a lot with my clients. And I would love to, I want to flush this out and like explore this as a conversation. So per usual, this is going to be a fluid conversation. We have no idea where this is going to ebb and flow. But because we don't know what's going to come up once we start kind of moving through it, Ashley's going to bring you kind of the Cliff Notes version of the concepts, and then we're going to kind of see where it goes. Because we want it to really be a dialogue that speaks to, I think, the unique experience of everyone with their body in relationship to this topic. So like if we were to
a little cliffhanger.
Suspense. But because I think if we try to generalize anything too much, we leave out people's lived experience, because we try to shove it into a box where there's just so much more nuance and there's so much more story. So we're going to try to see where this goes. Ashley, would you introduce us? Well, that's kind of appropriate for today's topic. Introduce us to today's topic.
Yeah. So I, in my practice, have been having a lot of conversations with my clients about, I'm going to just describe it as like an external consent for sexual activity. Not necessarily penetration, just sexual activity in general. And then them realizing that internally it wasn't necessarily what they wanted, or it didn't align, and what that looks like moving forward with, like, did they fail themselves? Did they just like, what were the reasons that they said yes? And then when did they change their mind? Because I think that that's something, in discussing like how to go about this conversation, Sara Cate and I talked about. So it's like that sense of like, okay, I said yes, and I wanted to. What were the reasons? And then when did I decide that it didn't align? Because I think sometimes it happens after. I think sometimes it can happen months, years after, where you're like, oh my gosh, when I was in that situation, that actually wasn't in alignment with what I want. And then what does that look like for us moving forward
as a process?
Yeah. Like, how do we move through that? But I think also, so like this is a little bit of a conversation about like, what is consent to you? What's consent to you in your body? How do you actually know what you want? Why do you want to participate in some activities and some you don't? And then like, what are your hard stops? What are the no's? What are the
Mm.
enthusiastic yeses? Which, there's a lot of work out there now around consent being like an enthusiastic yes.
Mhm.
And a lot of times that's, capable. And
Sometimes
a
it
lot of
isn't.
times, exactly. And a lot of times it's not. And there's some specific situations that we want to bring into that particular thing. I think in a, I don't know, ideal world, maybe consent is always an enthusiastic yes. However, I think that there's just so much nuance with this topic that it's not always that clear.
Mhm.
And we both want to give justice to you and your personal experience, because it just wouldn't be true if we sat here and, like Sara Cate already said, and generalized and
Mhm.
said, this is how it is, and this is what this is, and this is what this is, and like, figure it out or you're not doing it right.
Well, I mean, I think I spent a lot of years not doing a lot of things not right.
Right.
But I think
But you were.
but I was,
Yeah.
and I was doing it with the tools that I had,
Right.
right? And like figuring out what I felt and what I wanted came out of a lot of
Mhm.
initial yeses and then
Mhm.
reflective no's.
Yeah.
And I think that in having this conversation, we always give this little reminder, but just to remember to take care of yourself.
Mhm.
We are, talking to some degree about things that are going to be activating. We're talking about consensual experiences in the channel of sex and intimacy. And if you have had anything happen that has made you feel unsafe or has been traumatic for you, please remember to take care of yourself, access our resources, reach out to us. Because this isn't, all of us at some point have likely had a boundary crossed, or
Mhm.
we've crossed a boundary that hasn't felt good.
Mhm.
And just honoring like that reality of like, this might even bring up stuff that you didn't know was there as we have this conversation, just because we're trying to have it in a different way even than we
Yeah.
normally have it, which is like the enthusiastic yes or the hell no. And then that's how you know, right?
Mhm.
But like, where is that kind of murky middle where
Mhm.
it's like yeah, okay. And the internal is like, this isn't aligned. And then feeling like maybe some self-abandonment in that, maybe feeling some shame.
Mhm.
I know that I have in my lived
Mhm.
experience. So trusting like what you need to do to take care of yourself is to stop the episode, pause the episode, or just not listen. Like it might not be the time. And that,
Yeah.
this is just another invitation for you to listen to your body and what you feel as we move through
Mhm.
this conversation.
Yeah. So maybe let's start with maybe differentiating between an enthusiastic yes and still a yes.
Like
Okay.
sure. With the question
So,
mark afterwards.
yeah. So, I want to like also pause and make an assumption that we are assuming that you are in a situation that your immediate physical safety is there. And if that's not the case, we have resources listed. Please, take care of yourself. In a relationship though, with one or multiple people though, there's a theory that or a concept I should say, that's called pain tolerance. Like, where is your pain tolerance? Now, it's like very accurate when in terms of like physical pain. So with my clients who are working through pain with sex, sometimes they get to the point where they're like, okay, it's still a little bit painful. However, I'm still willing to participate in this form of sexual activity because I still want to, right? And so there's a level of pain tolerance. So when you think of that concept though, in terms of like, I want to, and right, or that like question mark, what are some of the reasons that might be coming up? Like, where is your level of that like threshold of, if it's here, it's an absolute no. And we're not saying that you go past that. Again, this is like our assumption that you're not moving past your absolute no's. But in that gray, murky area, if it's not an enthusiastic yes, and like, let's say you're in a relationship with a really loving, safe partner, and this is a way that the two of you like to connect
Mhm.
to each other. And maybe there has been something in your past that you're not feeling fully in your body about, or when you participate in sexual activity, you know that there's part of your body that maybe checks out, or maybe your whole body checks out. Does that mean that then you cannot move into sexual activity with this person who you have deemed safe for yourself and for your body? Does that mean you shouldn't? And we're here to say, probably not,
Mhm.
right? Like,
Mhm.
because there are different reasons to engage in sexual activity. The goal of sexual activity is not always like, we're here to have orgasms and then go home.
Right.
Right? Like that might be the case sometimes, and great. But
But that's not that's painted as the ultimate goal.
right,
Right? Like it's
right.
and Ashley, we had a conversation about sex and pleasure a long time ago. Season 1 for sure.
Season 1, yeah.
And Ashley painted a really important picture of the way that like sexual culture speaks to this like orgasmic, pleasure focused, pleasure explosion. And how so many people don't have access to that or
Mhm.
cannot or don't experience that.
Mhm.
And so I think when she's talking about the enthusiastic yes, differentiating even between like the enthusiastic yes doesn't mean having orgasmic sex.
Mhm.
The enthusiastic yes can just be, I want to explore my body in relationship to your body
Mhm.
and being safe
Yeah.
in that.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that is can be an avenue of, maybe this is like a place where you explore like how you feel about this within yourself too, but you can also bring this to your partners, is exactly what Sara Cate just said, is like, my yes is for this exploration,
Mm,
and
mhm.
I'm not sure what that's going to be.
I might want to stop.
Right. And then, and you know, there is a self responsibility to, if you're at your hard no, to say no, you know. um and when you're in a situation where you are in that exploration, it's kind of one of those things that you're just like constantly evaluating, right? Like especially if you guys have decided to try something new, and it doesn't have to be something like, I don't know, that you like looked up on the internet, right? It could be just, it's new for this person to touch the inside of my thigh.
Mm, safely.
Right. In a
Mm,
safe way that like I want to explore this touch and
yeah.
see if I can stay present,
Mm,
or see if I can actually feel that hand connecting. Cause I think that that's really, and a really interesting touch can be a really interesting way to explore. You don't have to start on your inner thigh. You could start like on your forearm,
mhm,
right? But when somebody lays their hand on you, can you actually feel their hand in contact with your skin?
mhm,
Do you feel your body moving into them? Because there's a mutual, when there's safe touch, there's a mutual back and forth connection, even with your own hand. If you
mhm,
place your own hand on your forearm and you're not like feeling that it's okay to be in your body, you're not going to feel the mutual connection back and forth. And so this exploration,
mhm,
there's always a constant like, okay, what does that feel like? Right?
mm,
You can do this internally with yourself, but you can also do this in
mhm,
partnership with somebody next to you. And so your enthusiastic yes is the, okay, I enjoyed exploring that. Like, what should we do next? Right? Or where I like the hand there. So like, what happens if it stays a little longer? Is that an enthusiastic yes for me? Or is it like, okay, cool, I felt that, now move your hand, right? And like maybe place your hand somewhere else. That can be the enthusiastic yes. It's not the enthusiastic yes of like 0 to 100,
mhm.
right away.
Well, and I think, kind of what you had brought up before is like different understanding the distinction between the enthusiastic yes and like the sure. Um, and I think being able to give yourself permission to maybe have some awareness around the enthusiastic yeses are of like
Mm-hmm.
my enthusiastic yes might be my partner, but that might be where my enthusiastic yes stops.
Mm-hmm.
And then the sure is what Ashley was kind of talking about. Okay, let's see what it feels like when you place your hand here. Right. Or
Mm-hmm.
let's see what this kind of action feels like for us. And that might be more of the, sure,
Mhm.
let's try.
Mhm.
Right. So like being able to give yourself opportunity to move back and forth between the
Mhm.
enthusiastic yeses and I need more information.
Mhm.
Yep, absolutely loving that. And let's slow down a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. And like, it's almost like,
It's just a dance back and forth. And it's that like allowing yourself to have the opportunity to move back and forth. That's where the trust is built.
yes.
That's where you get to internally within yourself. You're coming to this place of like, okay, I know I'm listening now to the signs, right? I'm listening in this moment to the signs of like, yeah, you want to explore more. You're curious about this. Okay, now you're gonna like, now we want to move back over to this direction. Okay, like
Mhm.
now we want to go forward in this direction. Okay, now we're gonna like take a step back. That dance back and forth is how we learn in real time
Mhm.
to listen to what our body is saying.
Mhm. Because we might go into something um wanting to connect and wanting to be intimate with somebody, and through that there might be a line that it feels like, man, this is enough for me right now. And so often there might be this pressure that we
Mhm.
even place on ourselves. It might
Mhm.
not come externally from the person that we're with, but this pressure that we place on ourselves that once I've started, I'm not allowed to stop.
Mhm.
Right. And once I've said, yes, I want to be intimate, then it has to go all of the way. And that isn't true, you know, and yet it can feel very true and like almost absolute in the moment that I have
Mhm.
to then follow through.
Well, I think that that's what we're taught too, is like
We are.
that about consent specifically,
It's
is
either
that
a
if
yes
you
or a no.
give consent in the beginning, it's a yes, and like, and then you said yes.
Yeah.
And like Sarah Kate said, that it's not true. You get to decide at any moment.
Mm-hmm.
At
And
any moment.
and I think it starts truly. This doesn't actually start in difficult relationships. I think, where we exercise that, I think this is in fact something really beautiful that we could practice with people in our lives outside of sexual
Mhm.
intimacy. But like,
Mhm.
if I say yes to something, where do I give myself the exit of like, yeah, I said yes to going to that dinner, but now I'm realizing I only have an hour of energy left in me. Can I make this a coffee?
Mhm.
Right? Or wait, how do we adjust,
Mhm.
to actually listen and honor what our bodies are saying we have. And
Mhm.
we have I love that Ashley, Ashley was talking about pain tolerance specifically to some degree in her work. But I think that same principle works for our emotional and
It
our
for sure.
our body
Totally.
of like what feels like I'm getting overwhelmed, what feels like this is pushing me past my threshold, really.
Mhm.
And that exploration, maybe you're just starting it,
Mhm.
or maybe you've had things in your life that have asked you to get very self-protective. Um, and if that is the case, then this gets to be, this is our kind of desire, Ashley and I both, for you to explore what this all means for you.
Mhm.
Right. And I love that she brought up the idea of self-contact. I work with sexual assault survivors every day. And that self-contact is something that I work with very early on. If I start, with someone who has this kind of traumatic experience in their history, to be able to create safe touch between their own body and themselves.
Mhm.
Right. And that is just like Ashley was saying, a hand on an arm. Or I'll have them, because like sometimes we just go through our routines very quickly. And so I encourage them to practice like slowing certain things down, of like
Mhm.
when you're putting your body lotion on or your body
Mhm.
oil, can you actually recognize that you're placing it on your arm? Can you feel the warmth of the oil? Can you feel the contact of your hand? Right? These like really gentle ways
Mhm.
to reconnect and start to pay attention to what it feels like to be in touch, even to ourselves,
Mhm.
and then to expand that into partnership. Um, And so in saying all of that, I bring that in just as a conversation piece in this, because I think it's really important. Like Ashley and I are talking about the yeses and we're talking about the nos. But if that mechanism has never been built in you, if you've never had the space to know what that means, it can be really hard to know the difference between an enthusiastic yes and a dissociative yes. Of like, I just said yes because I was overwhelmed. Right. And we can tell ourselves I was enthusiastic about it. And yet there's something in us that might feel like we got dropped off a cliff.
Right. And that doesn't then mean, I think what then happens a lot of times is then we just like beat ourselves up for that.
Exactly.
And it it can be so simple for Sara Cate and I to sit here and be like, well, you did the best you could with what you had.
Yeah.
And while that might be true, because in that moment you truly were participating in the moment the best way you could. And it also is totally okay if later you're feeling like, dang it, I wish I didn't do that, right? Because then it's like, okay, you recognize where that moment was. You recognized what maybe wasn't, where that boundary was that maybe you didn't know before. Maybe the boundary was that you just don't want to have, you don't want to check out and say yes, right? Maybe the activity itself wasn't necessarily the boundary that was crossed, but it was like a dissociative yes that you participated in. You get to differentiate between like, where did this happen? Where was that boundary crossed? And now you don't have to like automatically be like, great, gained all this information about myself. Hell yeah, positive experience, right? That's not what this is. But it is a way for you to slow down and honor your process of moving through it.
Yes.
Of moving through, okay, I'm just going to use the dissociation as an example. If it was that dissociation, okay, where else do I dissociate that maybe is a little bit more accessible for me to explore a little bit more? Oftentimes sexual activity isn't like the first place to dive in because it's a little, it can be a lot. And so it might be like a dissociative yes to like dinner with, I don't know, someone, whatever the case may be, right? But it lends you to, okay, this is my tendency of dissociation. Where else do I dissociate? Where does my body want to let me in to gain more information about this? And then I'm going to move forward with this new information. And that's when also when you're working with your body in this way, this process that we keep talking about, it's like, yes, the noticing, the being curious, but then when you gain the new information, it helps you move forward and make decisions differently.
Yes.
And that process is not always like boom, boom, boom. It happens right away.
It's not linear.
But I do always find with myself, I do always find it so fascinating. And I have gotten better. I'm not, perfect at it, but I've gotten better at recognizing when I all of a sudden do make a decision and I'm like, oh, you really took into account how you wanted to feel with this. And you did that. And it's kind of like, sometimes I feel it does kind of like almost happen like, oh, I didn't know I was there. Okay, cool. Right. Like I didn't know I had enough practice. I didn't know I had enough behind me to like make this really informed decision about how I wanted to feel moving through whatever. It could be a job. It could be a friendship. It could be whatever. And then you do it. And then you're like, okay, awesome. Right. It's like a little piece of like confirmation of like, yes, I have been listening and I am moving through my process at my own rate and paying attention to what I need, right? Because I don't remember what episode it was in. Sara Cate said that like nothing is normal.
And wisdom bombs.
But it's so true. But it's so true because if we listen to what mainstream is, it's this lie of normalcy,
right?
That it's supposed to happen. And my process is very different than Sara Cate's process. And where my body is going to want to let me in a little bit to explore more is going to be very different than Sara Cate's. And the same for you. We might have similar experiences, similar things might have happened, but my individual process and your individual process is not like anybody else's.
And like, Ashley kind of brought up at the beginning, like when she sent me the text about wanting to talk about this, you had made a comment about kind of like the difference if we're talking, if we're going to talk in the gender binary of like male, female, like the experience of men with sex compared to the experience of women with sex. And we know, like, let's just be clear, the binary doesn't work in any regard to some degree because it's so fluid what we feel about our bodies and in relationship to sex. It doesn't matter what gender orientation we are, what sexual orientation we are going to have different experiences with what sex means to us and what is safe in sex. However, she did bring in, I think that's a through thread across the kind of spectrum, is the shame quality of like not knowing or doing too much, doing too little, right? Not having too much, having too little, the way we've been in relationship to it, carrying shame about that. It really is that experience of shame in relationship to sex is profound. I mean, I haven't had a conversation about sex myself or with a client that didn't somehow come to a place of, I have some shame about that.
Yeah.
It is almost inextricably bound to some degree because very many of us, I never want to speak in absolutes, but so many of us, I would guess the majority of us have not had a completely crystal clean, healthy relationship and experience with sex based off of our upbringings, based off of our cultures, based off of our experiences. There probably are some dings here and there in the middle of this thing, of this vehicular mobile. So, highlighting that, or just putting that on the table along with all of this, and recognizing that sex, sexual intimacy, all of these things, it can drop into that shame channel very easily. And so being really mindful as you care for yourself and as you work through your process in this, to recognize, like, am I questioning or am I being critical? Right. Because when we're being critical, we're probably going to dip our toe into the shame pool. But if we're questioning, like Ashley was saying, like, I'm constantly absorbing what I'm feeling, I'm noticing, I'm being curious, that feels okay. We need to back out a little bit, right? And like also finding our voice in that is a whole nother beast. But like being able to be curious and question our experience rather than being critical and judging our experience. And those, sometimes that's hard to figure out where we're at in that
totally
space.
So yeah, and if we like connect the dots here a little bit, when we are talking about that, like I used the example of a hand on your thigh, right? Again, there's a huge assumption that is made here, and you can't ignore this assumption that you're in a safe relationship,
right?
Where if it's two people or three people, however many, there has been a conversation where you've negotiated the terms of this experience.
Sometimes it's an experiment.
And that, yes. And that in of itself is a communication that you have to like work up towards having. And so that we can't like forget that assumption. This isn't like a thing. And this is where, again, like we have these resources listed. This is where working with somebody to help you figure out, how do I voice that? How do I come? Yes, I feel like my partner is very safe and I want to do this activity. How do I say that to them? That's where you deserve to be supported. That's what professionals are here to help you with, right? To help you find the way that it feels comfortable for you to voice your voice.
Yeah.
Not that this is like go practice tomorrow. That might be okay for some of you. Some of you might be like,
you might have access to that with your relationships.
And that's not the case. That is not the case for all of it. And I think that even that in of itself is giving the permission of understanding that maybe this is something that you desire. You desire to be able to speak what you're feeling. You desire just to be able to have this constant, like, how does that feel? Right? What am I does this feel like I want to move forward? Does this feel like I want to move back? To have that constant check-in with yourself is also something that is not afforded to everybody right away. And again, that is the assumption here that we're making when we're talking about this, is that there has been some kind of conversation started with your body. Sexual activity, again, likely isn't the first place that there's a lot of comfort, but it might be. We've talked about the coffee tea or like the oat milk, regular milk conversation. We've talked about that on many podcasts. It might be in the morning asking yourself, like truly asking yourself.
Yeah.
If you know that oat milk doesn't agree with you, truly asking yourself, do I want to drink this oat milk knowing what's going to happen? Or
Yeah.
do I want to make a different choice? That's where you get to practice this constant, like, okay, what is, and then if you drink the oat milk, then you can like say like, okay, how am I feeling? Right. In comparison to like, okay, yesterday morning I had cow's milk and like, how did I feel? Right. So it's these things that don't have as much charge. That's where the practice comes from before you move into like these places that are a little bit more challenging, with the understanding that if you have this desire to be able to voice your feelings, your emotions, your needs, your wants, your no's, that you don't have to do it alone, right?
Yeah.
Like we're here to provide a space where like people are talking about these things, because one of the things that clients say to me a lot is like, wow, nobody's talked to me about this before, or I've never felt like I could like say this to any other whoever they've been working with before, or like I just didn't get the help because it was like, you know, a topic that's like not like people just don't talk about. And so knowing that there are people who will have these conversations with you to help you is one of the most beneficial things I think of this, because maybe it's not you, maybe it's your sister, or maybe it's your cousin or whoever. And you can be like, hey, here's this podcast. They're talking about it. And there are people that can help you move through it. And we'll help you find those people if, you know.
Right. And I think even the fact that we're talking about it and the fact that Ashley brought it up, it likely means that those are in fact the people that have brought it up, and how many people don't, or how many people don't know. Or maybe, you know, there were things that as I moved through my therapeutic process, I was like, wow, like I didn't know that people actually had conversations about this, or I didn't know there was a nuance between a yes and a right, maybe, and like where the line was in that. Like there are so many things that I think we are an island in, that I am the only person that is having this experience. Therefore,
or that nobody will get it. Nobody will understand.
Get it, or that I'm crazy,
Yeah.
or that I shouldn't. I mean, I spend so much time validating my clients' emotions around this stuff. I had to look at a client the other day and say, no, that is not going to likely be a safe place for you to do that because of the traumatic experience that you had happen in that. I said, if you were in an elevator, and let's say you got stuck in an elevator and it was really intense and terrifying, are you just going to be able to walk into an elevator then in the next hour feeling free and in your body and light and, you know, like, oh, I can just do this? No, there are things that have happened to us in certain spaces that are going to affect moving forward, interacting with those spaces. And sex tends to be something that a lot of us have had a lot of interesting experiences with, and traumatic experiences with. So just participating with this in this like free way might not feel great, but we're told that, you know, we're supposed to be sexually liberated and we're supposed to be free in our bodies. And yet, how do we do that? How do we actually become free in our bodies? How do we feel embodied enough to do these things? And that is by giving ourselves permission to explore the yeses and explore the nos and find where those lines are. And until we do that, it will be very hard, really, truly, will be very hard to trust ourselves in being free and liberated, because liberated might actually look like a hell of a lot of no's. You know, it might not be all of the yeses. Being liberated might be like, no, that's not for me. No, I don't want to do that. Being liberated, specifically speaking, like I talked about this, there were certain positions that for one of my clients make them dissociate. And I was like, what if you just take this off the table? What if the conversation with your healthy, safe partner that you have now is, we're not going to do these 3, but these 4 are amazing.
Mhm.
And if those are just off the table, if those are no's, how liberated you are to just then explore with your partner those 4 that you know that you have access to.
Mhm.
It's liberation. Not that you can do all of them, but that you
Mhm.
have these ones that you feel like, I can just be safe and explore because I know I'm okay in these.
Mhm.
And if those are just those are no's, you are protected.
Mhm.
You are boundaried. You are in your kind of like container of safety. That's liberation.
Mhm.
But again, this is what Ashley was talking about, is like the world tries to paint some sort of picture about sex and sexuality that is like, just be open,
Mhm.
just enjoy it.
Mhm.
Right. And that it likely isn't a reality for most of us.
Mhm.
And so again, permission and invitation to try to be as curious as possible. If you are in a safe, consensual space, trying to be just aware
Mhm.
of like, love how that felt. And like Ashley was saying, in like really simple moments of your day,
Mhm.
that felt really good when I went for that walk, or it felt, yeah, having a coffee at 2 p.m. just isn't my bag. Like, I'm
Mm.
gonna be up too late.
Haven't learned that lesson yet.
Yeah, me either. It's a good thing we
Damn.
film in the morning because we would have treats in the afternoon. But like just being able to explore and
Yeah.
not and being very careful and very aware of the way that criticism and judgment can come in
Mhm.
very easily to this space, and recognizing like, when you become an adult, renegotiating your relationship to sex is a part of that adultness.
Yeah.
It's a part of that reclaiming of
Mhm.
who you are in the world.
I just to that, like, really quickly, this is like one of the reasons why I am so passionate about the work I do, is because a lot of the things that we're having to renegotiate right now as adults, we wouldn't have to renegotiate if we were given
Yes.
what we in our birthright deserved to have growing up.
Mhm.
And I've mentioned this multiple times on the podcast, but if we were just given the information about our bodies, if we were supported in our exploration of who we are, if we were asked, but what do you want, Ashley?
Mhm.
What feels good to you? Even with, I was just listening to a podcast this morning about how this one girl had this experience with her dad growing up, about he was very much like, instead of saying like, you got to get good grades so you can get into a good college and then get a good job that pays you good and then get married and have kids, blah, blah, blah. He would stop and say like, no, but what do you want? What would you do for free every day? And then let's figure out how you can get paid for it. Right. So like she had this, and I was like, I literally like almost started crying because I was like, my God,
What would that have felt like?
if we could just
Totally
have this experience, right? And that's like career path, but it is so true for
And
your
everything.
body,
Mhm.
for everything. If we could just have this experience from the time,
Yeah.
and it's age appropriate, right? Like,
Right.
it's age appropriate asking these, because we're humans,
Mhm.
right? We're not like things that need to be kept in a box.
Mhm.
We're here to explore. Being a human is exploration.
Mhm.
And so we're here asking our kids, like, what is it that you want?
Mhm.
What actually feels good? What do you enjoy? And
Mhm.
giving us the space to then, as we get older, continue to explore this independence within our body,
Mhm.
how we can practice saying yes,
Mhm.
how we determine what our no's are from the time that we're young, and
Mhm.
how that would transition into our teenage years, our young adult years, and then our later years. Like, there is just, talk about liberation,
Yeah.
right? Like, that is, to me, like the ultimate goal of like why I do the work I do. And I would literally talk to every single child if I could to help them. I mean, that would be hard, but anyways,
But it is.
but I would.
So if you did not have that lovely
I know.
experience growing up,
Jeez Louise.
and you're renegotiating some things, we hope that this conversation has created some possibility and opportunity for you to explore or create more space for the journey of discovering what the yeses are, what the nos are, what the maybes are, where the lines are, where, brake pedal, gas pedal,
Mhm.
where are those things at? Yeah. So if you need support, you know where to find us.
I don't have anything else. She looked at me like, what do you got? Nothing. Got nothing.
She emptied the tank. But we appreciate you being with us. Take care of yourself and happy exploring.
See you next time.